We're just about there. Okay. All right. Look, I will end it there because let's keep moving. It can take a while. I'll share the results of it. Yeah, you see that? You're now viewing the poll results. So there's a way of capturing it. As you can see, there's a bit of division around it. There are 3 answers that are coming up reasonably popularly. That you all see, those who have responded seem to agree that cultural hybridity is an expression of imperialist power is not his argument. We haven't quite worked out as a group, at least, where they are. So I will leave that for you to deal with in a few minutes. Let's just have a conversation about this all music is essentially world music. And one of the things, I hope you got the little message I sent down just to say, now try and put it in some of the terms that we've been working with. And this is part of the challenge, is to move from a kind of coffee shop conversation into a disciplined conversation, into a disciplinary conversation, to start using the language, the lingo of the discipline, which of course, I believe and hope it actually helps illuminate and helps us think our way through these things a little bit more. So, what's your response to that idea that all music is essentially world music?
As I personally disagreed with the statement, because I think it discounts the process of hybridization, kind of putting all these different genres and subgenres and how they're interpreted amongst class into like one blanket statement of world music. I reckon music can be shared across the world by everyone for everyone, but I don't think it can be classified itself as world music.
Thank you.
I agree as well, because as I watched the film on the metal, I realized that actually a lot of their context for their music is actually based on local issues, like how the Indonesians were very anti-Zionist, and there's a lot of local connotations underneath. So a lot of this is very hard to relate if you don't actually live in the situation. So I feel that is not really a global thing. It seems more like a local adaptation of a global style. So I wouldn't call it global music in that sense, based on the context of the music itself.
I disagree with that because I think a big point, especially in the documentary, was that it's transcultural, it's just like you saw people at those music festivals, like that music festival that was in the Middle East, and they're all from countries that like normally they wouldn't really interact with each other, but it's just like everyone's there for one purpose, and it's just to enjoy music. Like it kind of transcends cultural boundaries and national boundaries. So that's why I think it's global music, because yeah, it's interpreted differently in different places, but it can be interpreted everywhere. That's why it's kind of global.
Great. And can I suggest to you that all of those theses are defendable? And if you were to write it in an essay and support what you're saying, that becomes the aim of it. We're not looking for the truth here, because it doesn't exist. There is no true response to this in that sense. And I mean, it's not just a relativist argument that everybody's truth's okay. It's actually what we're looking for at a university setting is, of course, is an informed argument that picks up on the evidence of it. Anybody else want to join in on this?
Yeah, I'd actually argue against what Madison said about like using that example of all these different groups of people coming together to enjoy the music. I don't think that's necessarily representative of those various groups of people as a whole, because by and large those people have to have a certain level of wealth before they can go to the concerts, right? So I don't think to say that it's representative of different countries coming together to enjoy the music. Yes, there is an element of that, but there's people there that are not represented, that may be really huge fans of metal that just cannot leave their country for whatever reason to go, and a lot of that I would suggest would be to do with wealth too.
Rachel, in relation to what you said, if we talk about all genre of music, there are concert and there are also parade of music where it is accessible to everybody. So I think we can distinguish a type of music that is for a specific group, but then you have popular music, folkloristic music, which is accessible to everybody. So I think if we start to divide what is folkloristic or popular music compared to, you know, private concerts and band, it just still falls under the concept of music itself. For example, even in Brazil, where you have like the carnival and they play their own samba, reggae, I did something similar. It arose in Brazil during the same time of the metal movement, but they were not doing concert. They were street parading and everybody having fun. So, you know, music is accessible to everybody. It's just depending on what type of music, I guess.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I do think though that your music is changed by the concept and by your surroundings of how you experience it. Like for instance, listening to a CD through headphones at home on your own is not the same as going and getting the energy from a concert. And I think that's also something to be considered, particularly in a genre, I think like metal, which I do think lends itself really well to that communal and shared experience of group reaction to a piece of music.
Yeah.
Far more so than say orchestra, for instance. I mean, people might go there and experience it, but they're individuals in their individual space in that environment. Whereas it's much more.
Certainly not moshing along at a classical music concert or those waves of bodies. It's astonishing kind of stuff. The other thing I think that's worth putting into the mix here, and I don't want to. I want to move on to some other things as well. Is that in some ways that the comment about world music there is a response to the ethnicization of world music. It's actually understanding that it's a critique of that idea that music that comes from Africa or music that comes out of Indonesia is world music. And the music of the West, be it classical, be it metal, be whatever, is not world music. And it's actually just trying to say that it's trying to democratize that idea. Is I think part of what's going on there, or at least to relativize that idea. So I think it's just a perhaps understanding. I believe that that's what it is, but of course I've already pointed out I've not looked at his article carefully, so I'd need to see what else is being said in that particular space. Part of what I want to be then starting to move you towards, and one of the reasons, I mean, aside from the fact that I think it's useful for us to have these discussions, and I imagine that this is a topic that many of you get quite passionate about as well, but is to actually also start thinking about essay writing, to start thinking about how we turn some of these ideas that you're working with, some of which may seem quite esoteric to you, but just how do we start to work these into arguments, and how do we start to position ourselves in that way. What I want to do, you've still got those shared poll results. I hope that you've got that there. I just want to put up another little quick thing. Just let me get to here. What is deterritorialization? I'm not going to look for an answer here. I'm going to put you into groups. What's deterritorialization, and what's Peter C's argument? All right, I'm going to put you into larger groups this time. Recreate all rooms, and I want just halve the number now. That should get you into 4s and 3s, I think. Okay, I'll open those up for you and see how you go. You back up, Catherine. Did you have a problem? You there, Catherine? So I think we're all back into place. Again, I don't want to get into, so have you got the right answer here? Deterritorialization, as I see it, is about the weakening of the connections between culture and place. It's all right, Mr. Wolf, we'll be okay. The connections between culture and place, weakening of those connections. I just thought, actually, Wiki's pretty good here on a discussion of it. And reterritorialization, where the idea, so deterritorialization, reterritorialization, and it gives us from Deleuze and Guattari, who are two key philosophers whose work spills over well and truly into the social sciences, is picked up and used quite actively. But it's used in anthropology. So that idea about deterritorialization that Deleuze and Guattari get at is the taking over of land and then re-territorializing it in the image of the colonists is part of what they're capturing. But they're saying here in this piece, which is written by geographers, that's fairly clear as you go through it. But re-territorialization in anthropology has taken the term and used it taken it in different directions. And you can just read there that the ways in which people, in the context of the local culture, pick up an idea, a global idea perhaps, and make it their own. So Indonesian hip hop being used as an example there. So there's a movement growing out of the inner cities in New York City and Los Angeles during the 80s and 90s, and then getting incorporated into place in its own particular way. so that's actually not a bad sort of, that's not a bad start on this. I think this particular entry is written by one person. It's meant to be in common, the kind of thing that you may care to add your own thoughts into at some stage, add your own ideas about it. They're certainly saying that this page is not thought through all that well. I heard the song on the weekend, Californication. I've never listened closely to it. I have to admit to that. And didn't realize that really it's about globalization or Californication, the song. And they make an interesting point here about how a trend's picked up in California, likely to be picked up everywhere in the global community. That's the song picking that up. But they're making the point here just about that in terms of this mass media section, that the lyrics capture the essence of reterritorialization at a global level. California is a global node, a place where international trends can begin. And so that's where I think questions about all music is world music is I think the homogenizing argument's there in that. And it's hard to resist, I think, those elements of it. But it's where it begins, but they get picked up in their own way. They get reterritorialized is part of what's being, that's the way in which the term is being used in some other places. We pick up definitions and they get molded into the kind of shape that we want them to have to some extent for the argument we're trying to bring forward. So that deterritorialization, reterritorialization continues part of the evolution of global culture. And music is a great space in which to think about that. Now, what about that multiple choice question? Did you get to any resolution around that, I wonder? Hang on, I'll just stop sharing that. We are fairly divided on it. Did you, in looking at it more closely, any of you decide that one answer is clearer than the other? This is a tricky one, I realise, and it's tricky to deal with in this setting.
Would you say that E is a more accurate description of creolization rather than hybridization?
Yeah. Well, I mean, possibly. I mean, we're going to say creolization is an apolitical cultural process. What I think I would be trying to get at is Piercy arguing that it's apolitical? Madison's showing, I can only see a few heads. I can only see a few heads anyway, so I don't know. Some of you might be also shaking your head or nodding away. I don't believe he is for a moment saying it's an apolitical process. I don't think he has that kind of an idea. So I don't think E works for that reason. Anybody else want to do any knocking on the head of some of these ideas? I mean, obviously we agree that C is not what he's arguing either.
Martin, can I ask, when we talk about the apolitical cultural processes, for example, if we consider either commercial trades or merchant trades, for example.
But Aris, before we get caught up in the argument about whether or not it's political, the argument here is, what is Peter C's argument? That's what we need to hone in on. What's his argument? Not whether or not we agree with him. What's his argument? Let's go through. Let's work back up. Hybridity is a form of resistance by local cultures against the fundamentally destructive processes. Is that part of his argument? Is that his argument? He doesn't use the word resistance much, if at all. I think we could say, yes, go on, Madison.
I think he doesn't. I think he argued that it could be a form of resistance, but a lot of the time it's just interpretation. Like, it's kind of like, it depends on the existing power structures there. That's why I think it's more to do with, like, it's reconfigured through existing. Yeah. So resistance is one way to see it, but I don't think it's the only way. And I don't think, again, that's what he's arguing. It's not a resistance argument.
No, I don't
Certainly
think he's
not
arguing
saying
for
that.
resistance either, because he's like, he really doesn't. Yeah, as Madison said, like he's sort of taking into account like the context in which this is occurring, you know, across the globe. And I think, yeah, sort of blanket saying that it's a resistance, I don't think it's always a resistance. I think sometimes it's a form of acceptance too, which I think, which is what he's arguing.
And in the 80s, you may well have found quite a lot of arguments running in that way. Resistance gets discovered in the 70s and everything becomes resistance. And often when we look at it, we say, well, actually, it's just people getting by and making do as well. You know, it's part of that. All right. The answer is B. I think that he has got that kind of a balance going on there between the two. Power and hegemony are inscribed, but they're also refigured. So that's where the resistance elements can be part of what's going on. He's certainly not arguing it's a relationship of equality between the cultures being mixed. He's not making any argument to that degree. He's saying these things happen, but let's not try and measure this in any kind of a way in terms of equality. So it is B that really we're looking for there. I want to just spend the last 5-6 minutes going to the essay writing. So I really want you, I wonder how many of you, again, I'm not going to do a poll or anything like that, but I wonder how many of you have been looking at this and working out what essay you're going to write. I'll just make sure I get to the right page now. Okay. So we've got a set of essays there, 12 of them, 12 possibilities, including a possibility of writing of a sociology of COVID, if you're game for that, if you're up for that. But as you'll see, most of them reflect in some ways a specific part of a module. Others have a more generic element to it, but still they're speaking to, you'll see that, I think you'll probably notice by now that what we have is an idea that gets explored a bit further in a following week, or at least that's what's been happening with last week and this week's work. So there are the questions. Now, just tell me something. If I switch to this, can you see where I've just taken this to, preparing for your essay? Has that done that? Yeah, it doesn't just stick to the one page. I'm not quite sure how it looks from your side. So we've gone to preparing your essay. Now this is found down the side here in case you haven't gone there. And I don't know how many of you have been looking down here, but when you look down the assessment side, you'll see research essay here and then preparing for your essay immediately below it. It's recommended that you have a look at this. You start to look at what Study Smarter is offering to you. Remember, please, that Study Smarter have drop-ins. It's where you can start to share your writing once you start to develop that, and you can get feedback on your writing and your work on your essay. But what they're encouraging you to do is to get working on this and to start breaking down the question. So can you see now a survival guide? Does that come up on your screen as well now? Yep, yeah. So you can see so it's clicking through to where I'm going to. So first thing to do, work out what the question's asking you to do. Spend that time analyzing or unpacking. Don't misunderstand it. Clarify with yourself, clarify with others, clarify obviously with your tutor on this if you're unsure about it. Some of this will seem fairly obvious, I know, but it will. But at the same time, it's always worth going through some of those basics as well and not losing track of that. Excuse me, I've actually got somebody at the door who wants to see me. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave it at that. What I was going to do next was actually look at one of the essays that's there, and it was number 5 actually in the essays that are there, is globalization leading to cultural homogenization? And you can see how this week's work, because of course that's one of those general questions that then asking you to bring in the examples, and you have to assume that that's a part of it. So in justifying your response, part of what you need to bear in mind is bring in the examples, Okay, I'll have to leave it there for now, folks. And I'll see some of you in Toots tomorrow. And thanks for your participation this week. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, bye now. Bye now.
Thank you.